Hey guys, tonight we drift gently into the moonlit world of Li Bai, a poet whose footsteps echo through misty mountains and whose verses shimmer like reflections on a midnight river. You are not just reading about him, you floating alongside him, feeling the cool night air, and maybe, just maybe, catching the faint scent of plum blossoms on the breeze.
If you hoping for a quick sprint through history, you might want to buckle up. Li Bai's journey is more of a meander. And honestly, you might not keep up with his wandering spirit, but that's the fun of it, right? We here to relax, not to race. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you listening from and what time it is for you. There's something magical about knowing we are all drifting off together, scattered across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the gentle hush of the early Tang dynasty, somewhere along the ancient Silk Road. Picture yourself as a child, padding softly through the corridors of a modest home in Suyab, a city that now lies in modern-day Kyrgyzstan.
The air is tinged with incense and the faint, persistent melody of a distant flute. You are Li Bai, or at least you roll seeing the world through his eyes. Wide, curious, and already a little restless, Li Bai's family is not quite settled. His father, a merchant with a taste for adventure, moved the family eastward, chasing opportunity and perhaps a little peace. You find yourself in Simenon, the land of rivers and mountains, where bamboo forests sway and the air is thick with the promise of rain. It's a place that feels both ancient and new, and you, young Li, are already scribbling verses on scraps of silk, dreaming of distant lands. Here's a well-known literary fact to ground you. Li Bai would become one of China's most beloved poets, his works memorized by schoolchildren for centuries. His lines about the moon, about longing, about the wild joy of living, still ripple through Chinese culture today. But right now, you just a kid, enchanted by the world's small wonders and big mysteries. One quirky anecdote. As a child, Li was said to have been so precocious that he could recite classic poetry before he could properly hold a brush. There's a story, maybe true, maybe embroidered over the years, of him charming local scholars with his quick wit and fearless questions. Imagine being the parent at that dinner party. Your kid recites a 1,000-year-old poem, and you, just hoping he does ask the governor why his hat is so pointy. Cough. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's family was truly of noble descent or simply skilled at spinning a good origin story. Some say his father's merchant background was quietly upbraided in later retellings, as if poetic genius required a dash of aristocratic flair. But you, wandering through these early years, know that Li's real inheritance is curiosity, a restless spirit, a hunger for beauty, and a sense that home is wherever the next story begins. You spend your days exploring the riverside, chasing dragonflies, and watching the clouds drift over the mountains. That the world is big, mysterious, and full of promise. Sometimes you sneak away from your lessons to climb a hill and watch the sunset, the sky bleeding into shades of gold and lavender. You don't know it yet, but these moments, the hush of twilight, the gentle rustle of bamboo, the thrill of discovery, will shape your poetry for the rest of your life. At night the house is quiet, except for the soft murmur of your parents talking in the next room. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, letting your mind wander through stories of ancient heroes and magical lands. Maybe you a little too dreamy for your own good.
But who can blame you? The world is calling, and you already planning your next adventure. There are a gentle irony in these early years. While Li Bai would later be known as the Immortal Poet, his childhood is marked by very human worries. Will his family settle down? Will he ever see the world beyond Steinenwin?
Will he ever learn to sit still in class? Spoiler alert, not really. Cough. You might picture yourself, even now, as a child with a head full of clouds, a heart full of questions, and a secret stash of poems hidden under your pillow. Maybe you not so different from Li Bai after all, just a little less likely to write a masterpiece before breakfast.
As you drift further into the night, you feel the gentle tug of curiosity pulling you onward. The rivers of Simandwan whisper promises of distant lands. The mountains loom, mysterious and inviting, and somewhere, just out of sight, the moon waits, ready to become your lifelong companion, your muse, and your gentle guide through the world of dreams.
You growing up now, and the world feels both wider and more confining. The grown-ups around you are convinced that if you just buckle down and study, you'll become a proper scholar, maybe even land a cushy job at court. But you, Li Bai, have other ideas. You gentle, slow, warm, and mystical elderly male. You restless, and the idea of sitting still in a classroom, reciting the same old Confucian texts, makes you itch like a wool robe in summer. The teachers drone on about discipline and duty, but your mind is already wandering to the glint of sunlight on water, the call of cranes overhead, and the distant blue of the mountains. Here's a well-known literary fact. Li Bai never actually took the imperial exams, the grueling tests that sorted ambitious young men into the bureaucratic machinery of the Tang dynasty. Most poets of his time would have seen this as a huge risk. Passing those exams was the ticket to status, comfort, and respect. Not Li Bai. He shrugs off the pressure, convinced that poetry and freedom are worth more than a government post. You get the sense that if standardized tests had existed back then, Li Bai would doodled in the margins and written a poem about the futility of multiple choice. There's a quirky story that floats around about Li Bai's education. Supposedly, when he was a teenager, he was sent to study with a famous recluse in the mountains. Instead of memorizing lines and bowing respectfully, he spent his days wandering the hills, writing verses on rocks, and occasionally startling the local wildlife with impromptu recitations. When one day he's said to have scribbled a poem on a tree trunk, only to be scolded by a passing monk for wasting good bark. You can almost hear Li Bai's sheepish laugh, promising to write smaller next time. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's refusal to take the exams was a bold act of rebellion or just the world's most poetic excuse for skipping homework. Some say he was too proud, others that he was too dreamy. Maybe he just didn't want to be boxed in like the truth. Well, you were living it now. The thrill of possibility. The urge to see what's beyond the next bend in the river. Your family, meanwhile, is supportive in that exasperated way parents sometimes are. They want what's best for you. But they can't help but shake their heads as you announce, yet again, that you off to unspined inspiration. You promise you'll be back for dinner, but you both know there's a good chance you be late, covered in dust, and humming a new tune you picked up from a wandering musician. You spend your days reading everything you can get your hands on. History, legends, Taoist philosophy, even the odd manual on swordsmanship. You convinced that a true poet should know how to wield a blade as well as a brush. Try putting that on your college application. There's a rumor that you once bested a local swordsman in a friendly duel, all while composing a poem about the fleeting nature of victory. Whether it's true or not, it makes for a great story,
and you never bother to correct anyone who repeats it. Your nights are filled with dreams of adventure. You imagine yourself as a wandering sage, a knight errant, a poet, warrior whose words can move mountains. The world is full of stories, and you want to live them all. Sometimes you lie awake listening to the wind in the bamboo, and wonder if anyone else feels this restless, this alive. You, not alone, of course. There are other young dreamers in your village, and you gather under the stars to share tales and challenge each other to impromptu poetry contests. The rules are simple. No reciting from memory, no repeating yourself, and bonus points if you can make the elders laugh. You win more often than not, your verses sparkling with wit and wonder. One night you compose a poem so clever that even the grumpiest old fisherman cracks a smile. That's when you realize poetry isn't just words on a page. It's a way of connecting, of making the world feel a little less lonely. Still, there's the tension that never quite goes away. The world wants you to settle down, to follow the path laid out for you. But every time you try, you find yourself looking out the window, longing for the open road you not sure where you going, but you know you can't stay still. You might laugh at yourself, imagining what your teachers would say if they could see you now, scribbling poems on river stones, trading stories with wandering monks, and dreaming of a life that doesn't fit neatly into anyone. Maybe you, not the perfect student, but you, learning something more important. How to see the beauty in the world, how to listen to its quiet mysteries, and how to turn them into verse. And so, you keep wandering, your heart light and your mind full of possibilities. The mountains are calling, the rivers are singing, and somewhere out there your next adventure awaits. You don't know what you will find, but you ready to discover it. One poem, one step, one gentle rebellion at a time. You elder now, and the world unfurls before you like a painted scroll. The rivers of Samoan are your highways, and the mountains your silent companions. You set out with nothing but a bundle of clothes, a battered brush, and the stubborn hope that the world is as beautiful as the stories say. The air is crisp, scented with pine, and the promise of rain. Every step you take, every bend in the river seems to hum with possibility of the one well-known literary fact. One well-known literary fact. Li Bai's poetry is famous for its vivid depictions of natural scenery, towering peaks, swirling mists, moonlit rivers, a prism work. His verses are so closely tied to the landscape that some scholars call him the opera poet, immortal of nature. But as you drift along these ancient waterways, you realize that for Li Bai, nature isn't just a backdrop. It's a living, breathing muse. The mountains aren't just there to be admired. They're old friends, always waiting with a new secret to share. You travel light, but your mind is heavy with dreams. There's a quirky anecdote that sticks with you as you journey. Once, while crossing a narrow mountain pass, you paused to rest beneath an ancient pine. A local farmer, passing by with his donkey, asks what you were doing. You reply, "I'm listening to the mountains song." The farmer shakes his head, mutters something about unsullied poets, and trudges on. Later, you jot down a poem about the encounter, imagining the donkey as a wise old sage who understands the language of stones and streams better than any human ever could. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's legendary wanderings were as extensive as his poems suggest. Some say he traveled the length and breadth of China, from the snowy peaks of the north to the warm lotus-filled lakes of the south. Others argue that he exaggerated a bit, letting imagination fill in the gaps where memory faded. But as you float down the Yantes,
watching the sun shimmer on the water, you realize it does really matter. The journey is as much about the stories you collect as the miles you travel. You learn to read the river's moods, the way it glimmers in the morning, the way it sighs at dusk. You spend hours perched on a rock, scribbling verses while dragonflies dance around your head, and sometimes you fall asleep under the stars, lulled by the gentle lapping of water against the shore. Other times you wake before dawn, eager to see what new wonders the day will bring. Along the way you meet fellow wanderers, fishermen, monks, traveling merchants. Each has a story to share, a song to sing. You trade poems for a bowl of rice, a warm smile, or a place to sleep. And you find that people are more generous than you expected, especially when you offer them a glimpse of beauty in return. One night, you were invited to join a group of boatmen around a campfire. They ask you to recite a poem, and you oblige, weaving their laughter and the crackle of flames into your verse. Later, one of the boatmen gifts you a small jade pendant. For luck on the river, he says. You still wear it, tucked under your robe, a quiet reminder that kindness travels as far as any poem. You develop a knack for finding poetry in unlikely places, as a tangle of wild flowers by the roadside becomes a metaphor for resilience. The distant call of a crane turns into a meditation on longing and return. Even the rain, drumming steadily on your straw hat, inspires a haiku about patience and persistence, and that you laugh at yourself sometimes, who knew that getting caught in a downpour could be so poetic. At least the frogs seem to appreciate your efforts, croaking their approval from the muddy banks. Your wanderings take you higher and higher, into the heart of the mountains. The air grows thin, and the world grows quiet. You find a hidden valley, shrouded in mist, where time seems to slow to a gentle crawl. Here, you sit for hours, watching the clouds drift by, letting your thoughts settle like silt in a calm pond. You write a poem about the silence, about the way it wraps around you like a soft blanket, soothing your restless heart. And you wonder, sometimes, if you ever find what you were looking for. Is it a place, a feeling, a perfect poem? Or is the search itself the answer? You decide not to worry about it. You decide not to worry about it. The river keeps flowing. The mountains keep standing. And you keep wandering, one gentle step at a time. As evening falls, you find yourself on a rocky outcrop, watching the moon rise over the peaks. The world is hushed, bathed in silver light. You take out your brush and write a few lines, the ink flowing as smoothly as the river below. For a moment, everything feels right. The journey, the longing, the quiet joy of being exactly where you are. And if anyone asks what you're doing out here, all alone on a mountaintop, you will just smile and say, listening to the mountain's song. Who knows? Maybe the donkey was listening too. And, you find yourself drawn into the warmth of laughter and the gentle clink of porcelain cups. The world of Li Bai is not all solitary mountains and silent rivers. Sometimes it thaws a crowded table under a canopy of stars, the air thick with the scent of plum wine and the sound of friends reciting verse. You gentle, slow, warm, and mystical elderly male voyeur in the heart of a Tang dynasty gathering, where poets, painters, and dreamers come together to celebrate the fleeting joys of life. Now there is a low hum of conversation, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional dramatic sigh of a poet who's just realized he's run out of rhymes. Lucking. A well-known literary fact, Li Bai's poetry is inseparable from the culture of wine and camaraderie, a cant he often called the immortal of wine. And his verses are filled with references to drinking, feasting, and the bittersweet beauty of friendship. Many of his most famous poems were composed in the company of friends.
their lines flowing as freely as the wine itself. It's said that he could turn a simple toast into a masterpiece, his words sparkling with wit and warmth. But here's a quirky, lesser-known story. One night, after a particularly spirited gathering, Li Bai challenged his friends to a poetry contest. The catch: each poem had to include a reference to the moon, a willow tree, and, just to make things interesting, a chicken. The results were hilarious, if not always profound. Li Bai's own entry, which ended with a chicken dreaming of flying to the moon, had the whole table in stitches, vocalized. The next morning, the host found a trail of scribbled poems and empty cups leading out to the garden. No one could remember who won, but everyone agreed it was a night worth writing about. Scholars still debate whether Li's legendary drinking habits were exaggerated by later storytellers, or if he truly could outlast even the hardiest wine merchants of Changwon. Some say his drunkenness was more poetic than literal, a way of describing his ability to lose himself in the moment, to let go of the world's worries, and embrace the joy of creation. Others point to the sheer number of wine-themed poems in his collected works and raise an eyebrow. You, sitting at this imaginary table, decide it doesn't really matter. What counts is the laughter, the shared stories, and the sense that, for one shining night, anything is possible. You watch as Li Bai raises his cup, his eyes sparkling with mischief and inspiration. He toasts to friendship, to poetry, to the moon that watches over them all, and the others join in, their voices blending into a chorus of hope and longing. Showman starts a song, and soon the whole group is singing, their melodies weaving through the night like a gentle breeze. You can't help but smile. There's a kind of magic in these gatherings, a feeling that the world is bigger and brighter when shared with kindred spirits. As the night deepens, the conversation turns to dreams and regrets. One friend confesses that he wishes he traveled more, seen the world beyond the city walls. Another admits to a secret love, her cheeks flushed with more than just wine. Li Bai listens, nodding thoughtfully, and offers a poem about the beauty of longing, the way it sharpens the senses and keeps the heart alive. The others fall silent, moved by his words. For a moment, the only sound is the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. You notice how Li Bai has a knack for making everyone feel seen, for turning even the most ordinary moment into something worth remembering. He teases the shy ones, encourages the uncertain, and never lets anyone's cup stay empty for long. He's a master of ceremonies, a conductor of laughter and longing. Even when the wine runs low and the candles sputter out, the warmth lingers, a gentle glow that follows you long after the night is over. There's another story that surfaces as the party winds down. Li Bai once wrote a poem so beautiful that it made a friend weep into his soup. The next day, the friend tried to recite it from memory, but could only remember the line about moonlight on the river. Li Bai just laughed and promised to write another, even better, the next time they met. Quick, you realize that, for Li Bai, poetry isn't about perfection. It's about connection, about capturing a moment and sharing it with those who matter most. As dawn approaches, you and the others stumble out into the cool morning air, your heads buzzing with wine and words. The world feels softer, more forgiving, as if the night's laughter has left a gentle imprint on the day. You promise to meet again soon, to share more stories, more songs, more dreams. And as you walk home, you find yourself humming a tune, the memory of friendship lingering like the taste of sweet plum wine. You might joke that if your own poetry group tried this, you end up with spilled coffee and a haiku about your cat. But here, in the gentle glow of Li Bai world, every gathering is a celebration, every friend a muse, and every cup a reminder that life, for all its sorrows, is meant to be savored together. You wake to the sound of distant bells and the soft glow of morning, the memory of laughter and poetry still lingering like the last traces of dew on a willow leaf. Nen today, though, your path leads somewhere new toward the heart of power, where the air is thick with incense and expectation. Li Bai's reputation has traveled far, carried by word of mouth and the occasional tipsy bard, until even the imperial court takes notice. You summoned to Changwon, the dazzling capital, where emperors and ministers gather beneath golden roofs to decide the fate of the world ancient. Here's a well-known literary fact.
Li Bai was invited to the Tang imperial court, an honor that poets dreamed of but rarely achieved. The emperor himself, Fulianzong, was said to be so enamored with Li Main's poetry that he asked the poet to compose verses on the spot. Sometimes, even during royal banquets,
You, Li Bai, are both thrilled and wary. This is a place of silk and ceremony, but also of rules, rivalries, and subtle traps. There's a quirky anecdote that always gets retold. On one of your first nights at court, the emperor, perhaps a little bored with politics, asked you to improvise a poem about the moon reflecting in his wine cup. You oblige, spinning lines so beautiful that the entire hall falls silent. Then, in a moment of absent-minded genius, or maybe mischief, you accidentally splash wine on the emperor's sleeve. The court gasps. You freeze. But Fulianzong just laughs, declaring, "A poet's hand is guided by the stars, not by etiquette." The ministers, of course, are less amused. You get the sense that you not quite what they expected. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's time at court was truly as brief and rebellious as the legends suggest. Guesses, you get this. Some say he was dismissed for refusing to bow to protocol. Others that he left of his own accord, unable to stomach the endless ceremonies and flattery. There are even tales that he once tried to ride a crane out of the palace gardens, though that may be the wine talking. What's clear is that Li Mi was never meant for gilded cages, no matter how beautiful the bars. You wander the palace grounds, marveling at the peonies and koi ponds, but your heart aches for the wild freedom of the mountains. The court is a world of whispers and hidden glances, where every word is weighed and every gesture scrutinized. You find yourself longing for the honest laughter of friends, the rough comfort of a riverside inn, the unfiltered beauty of a moonlit night. Still, you do your best to fit in, composing poems on command, charming the ladies, waiting with your wit, and occasionally sneaking out to the city, bustling markets for a taste of real life. One evening, you were summoned to a private audience with the Emperor Akshin.
He asks you to write a poem about the fleeting nature of power, the way even the greatest empires must one day fade. You hesitate, sensing the danger in such a request, but you can't resist the challenge. Your poem is gentle but honest, comparing the rise and fall of dynasties to the changing phases of the moon.
The Emperor nods, thoughtful, and you wonder if he hears the quiet warning in your words. You become something of a legend at court, the wild poet who refuses to play by the rules. Some admire your independence, others see it as a threat. You are invited to banquets and poetry contests, but you always feel a little out of place, like a wild bird perched on a silk cushion. And you joke that you the only one who brings a flask of plum wine to a royal audience, just in case inspiration or nerves strikes.
There is a night when you slip away from the palace, wandering the moonlit streets of Changabin. The city is alive with music and lanterns, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and roasting chestnuts. You find a quiet bridge over a canal and sit there,
legs dangling, watching your reflection ripple in the water. For a moment, you feel at peace, the noise of the court fading into the background. You write a poem on a scrap of silk, tuck it into a crack in the stone, and wonder if anyone will ever find it. You realize, as the days pass, that you can stay here forever. The court is a place of beauty and danger, but it's not where your heart belongs. You crave the open road, the company of friends, the wild inspiration that only comes when you free. So, with a polite bow and a mischievous grin, you take your leave, leaving behind a trail of poems and a court that will never quite forget the poet who dared to be himself.
You might laugh at the idea of yourself in such a setting, trying to balance a wine cup and a quill while dodging palace intrigue. Goff. But you know deep down that true poetry can't be confined by walls, no matter how golden they are. The world is waiting, and your journey is far from over.
You're back on the road, your spirit lighter, and your verses a little bolder after your brush with the imperial court. The world feels fresh again. No more stiff collars or ceremonial bows. Just the open sky and the winding path ahead. You carry with you a reputation now. People recognize your name, and sometimes they even offer you free wine in exchange for a poem. Not a bad trade, you think, as you wander into the next town, where the tavern is already buzzing with anticipation. And here's a well-known literary fact.
Li Bai is almost as famous for his drunken poetry as he is for his love of nature. His verses often celebrate the joys of wine, using intoxication as a metaphor for transcending the mundane and touching the sublime. Some of his most beloved lines were supposedly composed while he was tipsy, the words flowing as freely as the drink.
"Bring in the wine," he writes. "Let your cups never be empty." It's a rallying cry for poets and partygoers alike. But here's a quirky twist. Li Bai's drunkenness was as much performance as reality.
There's an old story that he once pretended to be utterly inebriated during a poetry contest, slurring his words and staggering about, only to suddenly recite a flawless, intricate poem that left the audience speechless. When someone asked how he managed it, he winked and said, "The wine is for the body, the poem is for the soul, inked." The next day he was seen practicing calligraphy with a steady hand, not a hint of a hangover. You might say he was the original method actor, if method acting involved more rice wine and fewer tragic monologues. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's legendary capacity for wine was fact or fiction. Some claim he could outdrink anyone in the Tang dynasty, while others suggest he simply knew how to play to a crowd, letting the myth grow with every retelling. Was he a true connoisseur, or just an expert at making a little go a long way? The answer, as usual, is probably somewhere in the middle. You find yourself at a raucous gathering, the air thick with laughter and the clatter of cups, vocalized. The rules are simple. Each poet must compose a verse after every round of wine, and the last one standing wins. You accept with a grin, knowing full well that the real prize is the memory of the night itself. The first cup is easy. Your words glide effortlessly, painting pictures of moonlit rivers and distant mountains.
The second cup brings a flush to your cheeks and a sparkle to your eyes. By the third, you weaving jokes into your lines, making the crowd roar with laughter. You notice that as the night wears on, the poetry becomes less polished but more heartfelt.
A rival poet stands up, swaying slightly, and recites a verse about lost love that leaves everyone silent. You respond with a poem about the comfort of friendship, the warmth of shared laughter, and the gentle sadness that comes when the night draws to a close.
Chuan raises a toast to the poets who keep us dreaming, and for a moment you feel a deep, quiet joy. There's a gentle camaraderie in these gatherings. No one cares who wins or loses. What matters is the shared experience, the sense of being part of something larger than yourself, a spout.
You might joke that you're just here for the free drinks, but you know that the real intoxication comes from the connection, from the way poetry can turn strangers into friends, if only for a night. As the evening fades, you find yourself outside, the cool air sobering and sweet. The moon hangs low over the rooftops, casting long shadows on the empty street. You lean against a wall, pen in hand, and scribble a few final lines about the beauty of impermanence, the way every moment slips away like wine from a tilted cup. You smile, thinking that maybe the best poems are the ones you never quite finish, the ones that linger in the air long after the last toast is made. You remember the story of the night you tried to write a poem while balancing a cup on your head, a dare from a mischievous friend. The result was a soggy sleeve, and a verse about the dangers of mixing poetry and physics. The poem was terrible, but the laughter was worth it. You tuck the memory away. Another story for another night. You realize as you wander home beneath the stars that poetry and wine share a secret. Both are best enjoyed in good company. Both can turn an ordinary night into something unforgettable. And both have a way of blurring the line between reality and dream. You raise an imaginary cup to the moon, to your friends, and to the endless journey ahead. A Kent, you wake with the sunrise, the world washed clean by dew, and the faint memory of laughter. Today, your path leads you away from the bustle of towns and the warmth of taverns, up winding trails shaded by ancient pines. There's a hush in the air, broken only by bird song and the distant rush of a waterfall.
You feel a quiet thrill. This is the realm of the Taoist mystics, the sages who claim to know the secrets of the universe, or at least the best way to brew pine needle tea. Well-known literary fact. Li Bai's poetry is deeply influenced by Taoism, the ancient Chinese philosophy that celebrates nature, spontaneity, and the search for harmony with the cosmos.
He often described himself as a banished immortal, a poet who belonged more to the world of clouds and spirits than to the dust of cities. His verses are filled with references to Taoist sages, magical mountains, and the pursuit of transcendence. Yet here's a quirky anecdote. During one of your mountain retreats, you stumble upon a group of Taoist monks practicing their morning exercises. Slow, graceful movements that look suspiciously like an attempt to swat invisible mosquitoes. Clucking, you introduce yourself, expecting a profound welcome, but the oldest monk just squints at you and asks, "Can you cook?"
Apparently. Enlightenment is easier to achieve with a good breakfast. You end up making rice porridge for everyone, and in exchange, they teach you a meditation technique that mostly involves not falling asleep while sitting very, very still. You later write a poem about the experience, comparing the search for wisdom to the art of making perfect porridge.
Both require patience, humility, and a willingness to accept lumpy results, as scholars still debate whether Li Bai's mystical persona was genuine or a poetic mask. Messner. Some argue that he truly sought immortality, spending years in the mountains with hermits and alchemists.
Others suggest he simply borrowed Taoist imagery to lend his poetry an air of mystery and depth. Was he a true believer, or just a master of poetic branding? The truth, as always, is as slippery as a mountain stream. You spend your days wandering through forests and valleys, seeking out hidden temples and forgotten shrines.
The monks you meet are a mixed bunch. Some are wise and serene, others grumpy and more interested in their vegetable gardens than in cosmic truths. You share meals, swap stories, and occasionally try your hand at their exercises, which mostly leave you sore and wondering if enlightenment is worth all the stretching.
One afternoon you sit beside a waterfall, letting the roar of water drown out your thoughts. You try to meditate, focusing on your breath, but your mind keeps drifting to old friends, to unfinished poems, to the taste of last night's wine. You laugh at yourself, realizing that even poets have trouble sitting still.
You jot down a few lines about the restless heart, the way it chases after clouds even when the sky is clear. In the evenings, you gather with the monks around a fire, listening to their stories of immortals and dragons, of sages who turned into cranes and flew away. You offer your own tales, embellishing here and there until no one is quite sure where fact ends and fantasy begins. The monks seem to appreciate your creativity, even if they roll their eyes at your more outrageous claims. If you can become immortal, one of them jokes, at least your stories will live forever. A breath.
You find that the line between poetry and philosophy is thin, almost invisible. Both seek to capture the fleeting beauty of the world, to find meaning in the dance of shadows and light. You write a poem about the moon reflected in a mountain pool, wondering if the reflection is more real than the moon itself. Content.
The monks nod approvingly, though one mutters that it's a shame you didn't mention porridge. There's a gentle rhythm to these days, walking, writing, listening, laughing. You feel yourself slowing down, your thoughts growing quieter, your heart a little lighter. The mountains teach you patience, the monks teach you humility, and the endless sky teaches you wonder. You might joke that if you tried to live like a Taoist sage back home, you'd last about 2 days before missing your pillow and your favorite snack. But here, in the hush of the mountains, you begin to understand why Li Bai was drawn to this life, a life where every moment is a poem, every breath a prayer, and every sunrise a gentle invitation to begin again. Neen. You linger in the mountains longer than you planned, letting the days drift by like clouds over distant peaks. But as with all things, the quiet doesn't last forever. One morning, a messenger arrives breathless from the climb, bearing news that pulls you back into the world below. You, Li Bai, have been exiled, sent away from the heart of the empire for reasons that seem as shifting and mysterious as the mists you've grown to love.
Some say it politics, some say it envy, and some whisper that no one who shines so brightly can avoid a little shadow. A well-known literary fact. Li Bai's exile is one of the most poignant chapters in his life.
Banished from the imperial court, he wandered the southern provinces, far from the friends and landscapes that inspired his happiest poems. Yet it was during these years of solitude that he wrote some of his most moving verses, poems that blend sorrow and hope, longing and acceptance, in lines as gentle as falling rain.
There is a quirky anecdote that softens the edges of exile. On his journey south, Li Bai is said to have befriended a group of local fishermen. They couldn't read a word of poetry, but they loved his stories and his willingness to help haul in the nets.
One evening, after a particularly good catch, the fisherman asked him to compose a poem about the river's generosity. Li Bai obliged, penning a verse so heartfelt that the oldest fisherman declared, "Ampas pies, you may not be from here, but you understand our river."
The next morning they gifted him a straw hat and a battered fishing pole, symbols of belonging, even in a place that isn't quite home. Men's scholars still debate whether Li Bai's melancholy during exile
was as profound as his poetry suggests.
Some believe he was devastated by separation from his friends and the court, while others argue that he found a strange freedom in his new life, an escape from the pressures of fame and expectation. Did exile break his spirit, or did it set him free? The poems offer hints, but never a final answer.
You spend your days wandering slow, letting the rhythm of the river guide your steps, and so the landscape is lush and unfamiliar. Bamboo groves, lotus ponds, the distant call of cranes at dusk. You write letters to old friends, your brush trembling with longing.
Sometimes you wonder if your words will ever reach them, or if they will drift away like leaves on the current. And still you write, because writing is how you remember, how you hold on to the people and places you love. You find comfort in small rituals.
Each morning you walk to the riverbank, watching the mist rise as the sun climbs higher. You greet the fishermen, share a bowl of rice, and listen to their stories of storms and lucky days. In the afternoons you sit beneath a willow tree, letting your thoughts wander as you sketch poems in the dirt with a stick.
Some days the words come easily, other days they hide like shy fish in deep water. At night you lie awake, listening to the soft rush of the river and the distant bark of a dog. You think of friends left behind, of laughter echoing through palace halls, of moonlit gatherings and songs that linger long after the last note fades. Akant.
The ache of distance is real, but so is the quiet joy of discovery. The way a new landscape can open your heart, the way a stranger's kindness can ease your loneliness. There's a gentle humor in your exile, too. You joke with the fishermen that you the only poet in the province who can tie a proper fishing knot. Clucking,
they laugh, promising to teach you how to catch the big one before your exile ends. You suspect the big one is more legend than reality, but you play along, happy for the distraction. You realize that exile, for all its sorrow, has given you a new kind of freedom.
You no longer bound by courtly expectations or the need to impress. Your poetry grows quieter, more introspective, filled with images of water and sky. Longing and releases, you write not for fame, but for the simple comfort of turning feeling into words.
As the seasons change, you find yourself growing softer, more patient. The river teaches you to let go, to trust that even the hardest journeys can lead to unexpected beauty. You may not be home, but you are, in your own way, at peace. You settle into the gentle rhythm of exile, your days shaped by the slow turning of the seasons and the ebb and flow of the river. The ache of distance never quite leaves you, but it softens, becoming a quiet companion rather than a sharp pain. You find solace in writing letters, long meandering missives filled with memories, questions, and the occasional terrible pun.
Some are addressed to old friends from Changwon, others to poets you met on the road, and a few to people you know you'll never see again. You imagine your words floating down river, carried by the current to distant shores. A well-known literary fact.
Li Bai's letters and elegies from exile are among the most emotionally resonant works in classical Chinese poetry. His sending off a friend poems, in particular, are famous for their delicate balance of sorrow and hope, capturing the bitter-sweet beauty of parting and reunion. Generations of readers have found comfort in his lines, recognizing their own longing in his gentle, moonlit farewells. But here's a quirky, lesser-known anecdote. During one lonely spring, you, Li Bai, decide to send a letter not to a person, but to the moon itself. You address it with all the formality of a court missive, sealing it with a splash of rice wine and a pressed lotus petal. You tuck it into a hollow bamboo stalk and set it afloat, watching as it drifts away under the silver light. The fishermen tease you for weeks, claiming they saw the moon wink in reply. You laugh, but a small part of you wonders if your words really did find their way to that distant glowing friend. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's letters from exile were intended as private confessions or as public performances. Some believe he wrote them for himself, as a way to process his feelings and keep loneliness at bay. Others argue that he concocted them with an audience in mind, knowing that his words would travel far beyond their intended recipients. Hence, was he writing for comfort or for legacy? As you watch your latest letter slip away on the current, you realize it doesn't matter. The act of writing is its own reward, a way to bridge the gap between hearts no matter how far apart. You spend quiet afternoons recalling old companions, their laughter echoing in your memory. There's Du Few, your poetic brother in arms, whose verses are as sharp as yours are dreamy.
You remember the night you both tried to outdo each other in a contest of metaphors, ending with Du Fu comparing your beard to a startled hedgehog. Clucking. You nearly fell off your stool laughing, and the innkeeper threatened to ban poets for life. You jot down a poem in Du Fu's honor, tucking it into your sleeve for the next time you meet.
You write elegies, too, for friends who have passed or vanished into the shifting tides of history. Your words are gentle, never bitter, filled with gratitude for the moments you shared. You recall the friend who always brought you wildflowers, the one who could recite every line of your poetry but never remembered your birthday, the fisherman who taught you how to mend a net and then disappeared one autumn night.
Each memory becomes a verse, each loss a quiet blessing. Fishermen become your new circle of companions. Yet they may not understand your poetry, but they appreciate your stories and your willingness to help patch a leaky boat. One evening, you teach them a simple song about the river, and soon the whole village is humming it as they work.
You realize that friendship doesn't always need words. Sometimes a shared meal or a helping hand says more than 1,000 poems. There's a gentle humor in your letters home. You describe the local cuisine, spicy fish stew, not for the faint of heart. The weather, rainy, with a chance of more rain, and your ongoing battle with the village rooster, who seems determined to wake you before dawn every morning.
You threaten to write an epic about your feud, but the rooster remains unimpressed. You find yourself growing more patient, more accepting of the world's small disappointments and quiet joys. And the ache of distance is still there, but it coffined by the warmth of new connections and the comfort of old memories.
You realize that home is not a place, but a feeling. A sense of belonging that can be found wherever there are kind hearts and open doors. As you watch the moon rise over the river, you take out your brush and write a final letter for the night.
You don't know if it will ever reach its intended recipient, but you send it anyway, trusting that somewhere, someone will feel the gentle tug of your words and know they are not alone. You find yourself wandering not just through forests and villages, but through the landscapes of your own imagination.
Exile, for all its loneliness, has unlocked a new kind of freedom, a freedom to dream, to invent, to escape the boundaries of the everyday. Some days, you sit by the river bank and let your mind drift to places that aren't marked on any map. You sketch out utopias with your brush, painting worlds where sorrow is a stranger and every path leads to peace. And a well-known literary fact: Li Bai's poetry is renowned for its dreamlike quality, often blurring the line between reality and legend.
One of his most famous inspirations is the ancient tale of the Peach Blossom Spring, a hidden paradise where people live in harmony, untouched by the troubles of the outside world. And Li Bai's verses return again and again to this theme of escape, inviting readers to follow him into realms of beauty and wonder.
But here's a quirky anecdote.
You once tried to find your own peach blossom spring, following the river upstream until the banks grew wild and the air shimmered with the scent of unseen flowers. You asked a passing farmer if he knew the way, and he pointed to a thicket of brambles, saying, "Paradise is just through there, if you don't mind the thorns."
You laughed, thanked him, and promptly got your robe snagged on the first bush. The only thing you discovered was a family of startled rabbits and a new appreciation for sturdy clothing. Later you wrote a poem about the journey, concluding that sometimes the search for paradise is paradise enough.
Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's escapist visions were a form of social critique or a personal longing for peace. Some see his imagined utopias as gentle protests against the chaos and corruption of the world. Others interpret them as expressions of a poet's restless heart, always yearning for something just out of reach. Was he offering his readers a refuge, or simply inviting them to share in his dreams? The answer, as always, is as elusive as the peach blossom spring itself. You spend long afternoons lost in reverie, letting your thoughts wander as freely as your feet out.
You imagine hidden valleys where the air is always sweet and the rivers run clear, where friends gather beneath blossoming trees and time moves at the pace of a drifting cloud. In these imagined places no one is ever exiled, and every farewell is followed by a joyful reunion.
You write poem after poem, each one a doorway into a world that exists only in ink and longing. Sometimes your daydreams take on a life of their own. You imagine yourself as a wandering sage, welcomed by villagers who offer you tea and stories in exchange for a verse, and
or you picture a land where poets rule and the laws are written in rhyme, where the only crime is a poorly crafted metaphor, and the punishment is to listen to your own worst poem read aloud at dawn. Clucking, you chuckle at the thought, grateful that, at least in your dreams, the world makes sense.
You share your imagined worlds with the fishermen and villagers, spinning tales of hidden springs and magical mountains. They listen with wide eyes, sometimes skeptical, sometimes enchanted. But one child asks if she can come with you the next time you find a secret paradise. You promise to leave a trail of poems so she can follow, and her smile is bright enough to light up the whole riverbank.
There's a gentle humor in your escapism. You joke that if you ever do find the peach blossom spring, you'll send a postcard, though the local postmaster is still waiting for one from the moon. You tease the fishermen that their favorite fishing spot is probably the entrance to a hidden utopia, and they reply that if paradise has mosquitoes, they are not interested.
You realize that the act of imagining, of dreaming up better worlds, is itself a kind of resistance, a gentle refusal to let sorrow or disappointment define you. Your poetry becomes a bridge, connecting the real and the imagined, the past and the possible. You may never find the perfect utopia, but you can create moments of beauty and hope wherever you are.
As the sun sets, you sit beneath a peach tree, watching the petals drift on the evening breeze. You write a final verse for the day, a gentle invitation to anyone who might be listening. Come, follow me where the river bends, where dreams and daylight softly blend.
You smile, knowing that paradise is sometimes just a poem away, and breath. You find yourself drawn ever more deeply to the moon, a companion who never judges, never leaves, and always returns no matter how many nights pass, and that the moon becomes your muse, your confidant, and sometimes your only audience as you wander the quiet paths of exile, and its silver glows the world in gentle mystery, turning even the most ordinary night into something worth remembering. Well-known literary fact. Li Bai is perhaps the most famous moon poet in Chinese literature. His verses are filled with lunar imagery, sometimes wistful, sometimes playful, always imbued with a sense of longing and wonder. Before my bed the bright moonlight you recite, and generations of readers instantly recognize the opening of his beloved Quiet Night thought. For Li Bai, the moon is never just a celestial body. It's a mirror for the soul, a bridge between distant friends, and the symbol of the beauty that endures even when everything else changes But here's a quirky anecdote. One night, after a few too many cups of rice wine, you decide to try and catch the moon's reflection in a river. You lean over the water, reaching for that shimmering disk, only to lose your balance and tumble in with a splash that startles every frog for a mile. The fishermen who pull you out are torn between concern and laughter, and you end up composing a soggy poem about but embracing the moon with both arms and waking up with a nose full of riverweed. Not your finest work, but it becomes a favorite among the villagers, who never let you forget your moonlit swim. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's fascination with the moon was rooted in Daoist symbolism, personal nostalgia, or simply a love of beautiful imagery. Some argue that the moon represents the poet's yearning for home and lost friends. Others see it as a stand in for enlightenment or the fleeting nature of happiness. Was Li Bai a philosopher, a romantic, or just someone who liked a good night walk? The answer, as usual, is all of the above. You notice how the moon seems to follow you wherever you go, peeking through bamboo leaves, gliding across the river, or casting long shadows on the path ahead. On lonely nights, you talk to it as if it were an old friend, sharing your hopes and fears, your triumphs and regrets. Sometimes you imagine that your friends are looking at the same moon, and the distance between you shrinks until it feels like you could reach out and touch them. You write poem after poem, each one a love letter to the moon, and you marvel at the way its light turns the world to silver, softening the edges of sorrow and sharpening the beauty of small things, a dew-soaked spiderweb, a sleeping dog, the slow drift of mist over the water. You joke that if the moon ever answered back, it would probably ask you to stop waking up the frogs. Your moonlit musings become legendary among your companions. The fishermen claim you can predict the weather by the color of the moon, and the children insist you must be part moon yourself, since you never seem to sleep when it's full. Clucking. You play along, sometimes pretending to be a moon spirit who can grant wishes or recite poems in your sleep. The laughter and wonder you inspire remind you that poetry is not just for scholars and courtiers. It's for anyone who's ever looked up at the night sky and felt a little less alone. Sometimes you wonder why the moon captivates you so. Is it the way it connects you to the past, to friends and places you can no longer reach? Or is it simply the comfort of its steady, silent presence, a gentle reminder that beauty endures even in the darkest times? You decide it doesn't matter. The moon is yours, and you are the moon's, and together you wander through the night, weaving dreams out of silver light, and as you settle down to sleep, the moon keeps watch at your window, bathing your dreams in gentle radiance. You whisper a final poem, a thank you for its company, and drift off with a smile, knowing that wherever you go, you never truly be alone. Breath, you find yourself in the company of poets again, the air crackling with wit and friendly rivalry. Word of your verses has traveled far, and now, wherever you go, there's always someone eager to test their skill against yours. Sometimes it's a young scholar with ink, stained sleeves, and nervous energy. Other times it's a grizzled old bard who claims to have outdrunk every poet from here to the capital. Blucking! The duels are rarely serious, more like games of chess played with words, where the only prize is laughter, and the satisfaction of a clever turn of phrase, is well-known literary fact. Li Bai's reputation as a poetic genius was matched only by his status as a legend in his own lifetime. He was often compared to Du Fu, his close friend and sometimes friendly rival, and together they are celebrated as two of the greatest poets of the Tang dynasty. Their playful competitions and mutual admiration have inspired generations of writers, each hoping to capture a bit of their magic. But here's a quirky anecdote. One night, at a riverside inn, you and Du Fu decide to hold a unperverse poetry contest. The goal? To compose the worst possible poem, filled with clumsy rhymes and absurd metaphors. The innkeeper is the judge, and the prize is a bowl of noodles. You write a verse about a lovesick carp and a moon made of tuff, while Du Fu counters with a lament for a lost sandal. The innkeeper laughs so hard he nearly drops the noodles, declaring it a tie and insisting you both eat for free. The breadth of the story spreads, and soon unpied poem night becomes a tradition in inns across the land. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's legendary exploits were fact or fiction, truth or tall tale. Some say he really did leap into a river chasing the moon, or that he once bested a court official in a duel of insults so clever it became a folk song. Others argue that these stories grew with every retelling, embroidered by admirers who couldn't resist adding a little extra sparkle to the legend. And was Li Bai truly larger than life, or did life simply rise to meet his legend? The answer, as always, is a little of both. You find that these poetic duels are about more than just words. They be about connection, camaraderie, and the joy of creation. But you tease your rivals, poke fun at your own quirks, and never take yourself too seriously. Sometimes you win with a line so beautiful it hushes the crowd. Other times you lose gloriously, your poem so ridiculous that even you can keep a straight face. The important thing is the laughter, the applause, and the sense that for a moment everyone in the room is part of something magical. You notice how stories about you take on a life of their own. In one village, you are known as the poet, who can charm fish out of the river with a single couplet. In another, they say you once wrote a poem so moving that an old willow tree burst into blossom in the middle of winter. You play along, sometimes adding your own embellishments, sometimes letting the tales grow wild. You realize that legend is just another kind of poetry, a story that belongs to everyone, shaped and reshaped by each new listener. There's a gentle humor in these gatherings. You joke that if you ever run out of inspiration, you will just borrow a line from Du Fu. He'll never notice. You say with a wink. Your friends threaten to write an epic about your potterable taste in hats, and you promise to compose a ballad in praise of their snoring. The laughter is easy, the friendship's real, and the poetry flows like wine. You realize that rivalry at its best is just another form of love, a way of challenging each other to reach higher, to dig deeper, to find new ways to turn life into art. You grateful for every duel, every jest, every story that grows in the telling. You know that long after you're gone, your poems, and the legends that surround them, will keep wandering just like you. As the night winds down, you raise a cup to your companions, to the poets who came before, and to those still to come. You toast to the stories that bind you together, and to the gentle mystery that turns even the simplest gathering into something unforgettable. You sense the river calling you once more, its current tugging at your heart with a quiet insistence. And the years have flowed by, carrying you through laughter and exile, moonlit nights and raucous poetry duels. Now, as your hair turns silver and your steps grow slower, you feel the urge to follow the water wherever it leads. The journey is softer now,
less about seeking fame or outwitting rivals, and more about savoring each gentle moment as it comes, well-known literary fact.
Li Bai's final days are shrouded in legend, with many stories centering on his deep connection to rivers and water. The most enduring myth claims that he drowned while trying to embrace the reflection of the moon in the Yangtze's river, a fittingly poetic end for a man so enchanted by beauty and longing. While historians doubt the literal truth of this tale, it has become part of his enduring mystique, a final merging of poet, water, and moon. But here's a quirky anecdote. In his later years, Li Bai became something of a local celebrity along the riverbanks. Children would run ahead to announce your arrival, and innkeepers would compete to serve you their best wine. There's a story that you once paid for a boat ride with a poem written on a leaf, tossing it into the river as a gift to the water spirits, and boatman, delighted, claimed his catch doubled that day. And for months afterward, fishermen searched for Opcupa's magic leaves along the shore, hoping for a lucky verse of their own. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's final journey was a deliberate farewell or simply another chapter in a life spent drifting between worlds. Some suggest he sensed his time was ending and chose to travel the river one last time, seeking solace in the landscapes that had always inspired him, as others argue that he was simply following his restless spirit, unable to settle even as age crept in, that he chased the moon's reflection out of longing, madness, or pure poetic whimsy. The answer, as ever, is lost in the gentle swirl of myth and memory. You drift downstream, the river's song as familiar as your own heartbeat. The banks are lined with willows and wildflowers, their reflections rippling in the current. You pause in small villages, sharing stories and verses with anyone who will listen. Sometimes you find yourself alone on a misty morning, the world hushed except for the splash of a heron taking flight. You write a poem about the beauty of endings, the way every journey circles back to its beginning. There is a quiet joy in these days. You no longer chase after fame or approval. You simply write because it brings you peace. Your poems grow softer, more contemplative, filled with gratitude for the river, the moon, and the friends you have met along the way. And you joke with the boatmen that you were looking for the perfect spot to catch the moon, and they promise to keep an eye out for any suspiciously shiny fish. Clucking, you notice how the river holds memories, each bend recalling a night of laughter, a whispered secret, or a song sung under the stars. You remember the fisherman who taught you to mend a net, the child who asked for a poem about dragons, the old friend who once outdrank you at a moon festival. Each memory is a gentle wave, carrying you onward. As night falls, you find yourself on the deck of a small boat, the water gleaming silver beneath the full moon. You lean over the side, watching your reflection mingle with the moon's, the two images blurring until you can tell where one ends and the other begins. You laugh softly, remembering all the times you tried to capture the moon, and all the times it slipped through your fingers. Perhaps that's the secret, to love the chase, even knowing you'll never quite catch what you seek. You close your eyes, letting the river rock you to sleep. You dream of moonlit mountains, of friends waiting on distant shores, of poems that float like leaves on the current. You know that wherever the river leads, you'll greet it with an open heart and a gentle smile. You awake to the soft hush of dawn, the river gliding quietly beneath your boat. The air is cool and tinged with mist, and for a moment you simply listen to the water's gentle murmur, to the distant call of a crane, to the faint echo of your own verses drifting through memory. The journey has slowed, but your spirit is light, buoyed by the knowledge that your words have traveled farther than your feet ever could. That well-known literary fact. Li
Their influence has echoed through centuries, shaping not only Chinese poetry, but also art, music, and philosophy. His verses are carved on temple walls, recited at festivals, and woven into the fabric of daily life. Later poets, from the Song dynasty to modern times, have looked to his work for inspiration, sometimes borrowing his imagery, sometimes challenging his style, but always acknowledging the gentle power of his voice. But here's a quirky anecdote. Long after your passing, a group of painters in Hangzhou began a tradition of Pine moon viewing picnics, inspired by your poetry. They would gather by the West Lake, sipping wine and composing verses in your honor, each trying to outdo the others in capturing the moon's elusive beauty. One year, a mischievous artist floated a paper lantern shaped like a wine cup across the lake, declaring it Li Bai's spirit come to join the fun. Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's legacy is best understood as a model of personal freedom or as a symbol of poetic perfection. Some see him as the ultimate romantic, forever chasing beauty and truth. Others emphasize his technical mastery, his ability to blend classical forms with spontaneous emotion, as was he a wild spirit or a careful craftsman. The answer, as always, is both. His genius lies in the way he balanced discipline with delight, tradition with innovation. You notice how your poems have taken on a life of their own, whispered by travelers on mountain paths, sung by children at play, pondered by scholars in candlelit rooms. Some lines have become proverbs, others private comforts, but all carry a trace of your gentle wonder. You imagine a young poet, centuries from now, stumbling upon your verses and feeling the same thrill you once felt beneath the moon. Do you hope they'll laugh at your jokes, marvel at your imagery, and perhaps, in a quiet moment, feel a little less alone? Your influence extends beyond words. Painters try to capture the landscapes you described, their brushstrokes echoing your lines. Cant musicians set your poems to music, letting your rhythms dance in new forms. Even in distant lands, your name becomes a symbol of poetic freedom. Japanese Haiku masters, Persian mystics, and French romantics all find something kindred in your wandering spirit. There is a gentle humor in how legends grow. You hear stories of unmilay society that meets every full moon to recite your poems and debate whether you really did ride a crane into the clouds. Some claim to have seen your ghost wandering the riverbanks, still searching for the perfect rhyme. I can't. You smile at these tales, grateful that your life has become a story others want to tell. You realize that legacy is not about monuments or fame, but about the quiet ways your words touch the hearts of strangers. Each poem is a pebble dropped in a pond, its ripples spreading outward, unseen but enduring. Oh, you hope that wherever your verses travel, they bring a little beauty, a little comfort, a little gentle mystery. As the sun rises, you take up your brush one last time, writing a poem of gratitude for the river, for the moon, for the friends and strangers who have carried your words forward. You know that in some small way you will keep wandering, echoing through the centuries, a gentle voice in the world's great conversation. You rest now in the hush of twilight, the river's song a soft lullaby beneath the gathering stars. The world feels gentle and vast, and you sense your journey drawing to a close, not with a grand farewell, but with the quiet contentment of a poet who has wandered far and found beauty in every bend of the road. You look back, not with regret, but with gratitude for the laughter, the friendships, and the verses that have carried you through every season. A well-known literary fact. Li Bai's poetry remains one of the most beloved treasures of Chinese literature, his lines memorized by school children and cherished by dreamers of every age. His vision of life as a journey, sometimes joyful, sometimes bittersweet, continues to inspire those who long for adventure and those who seek solace in gentle words. But here a quirky anecdote to soften the night. There breathes a legend that, after Li Bai's passing, a willow tree grew at the spot where he last watched the moon. The villagers noticed that its branches always seemed to sway in rhythm with the river's flow, as if the poet's spirit lingered there, whispering new verses into the wind.
Children would tie scraps of paper to its branches, each bearing a wish or a poem, hoping the puppeted willow would carry their dreams downstream. The tree became a gathering place for storytellers and lovers, a living memorial to the gentle immortality of poetry and Scholars still debate whether Li Bai's immortality lies in his words or in the myths that have grown around him. Some say his spirit lives on in every moonlit night, every riverbank gathering, every heartfelt farewell. Others believe it's the enduring comfort of his poetry, the way it soothes, inspires, and gently stirs the imagination, that makes him truly immortal. And
is it the man, the myth, or the magic of his verse? As always, the answer is a little of each, woven together in the hush of night. And you feel the world slow around you, the sky deepening to indigo, the river settling into its ancient groove.
You realize that Li Bai's greatest gift is not just his poetry, but the sense of wonder he leaves behind, a gentle reminder that there is beauty in wandering, in longing, in dreaming beneath the moon. You smile, knowing that as long as someone pauses to listen to the river, to watch the moon rise, or to whisper a poem into the night, the poet's spirit will never truly fade.
And now, as the story grows softer and the night deepens, you let yourself drift into the gentle quiet that follows a long journey. And the river's song slows to a soothing murmur, the air cool and sweet against your skin. The moon, your faithful companion, hangs low and luminous, bathing the world in a silvery calm.
You feel each breath deepen, your body growing heavier, your thoughts floating like leaves on still water. The memories of Li Bai's wanderings settle around you, mountain mists, laughter with friends, the soft glow of lanterns on the river. Breath. Each image is a gentle invitation to rest, to let go of the day's cares, and to trust in the comfort of dreams. And you remember the willow tree, its branches swaying softly, carrying wishes and poems into the night. You imagine your own hopes joining them, drifting downstream, guided by the poet, gentle spirit.
Your mind grows quieter, the edges of the world blurring into a peaceful haze. The worries and noise of the day recede, replaced by the soft cadence of poetry and the endless embrace of night as you feel safe, cocooned in the hush of ancient stories and the promise of new dreams. Let yourself rest now.
Let the river carry you. Let the moon watch over you. And let the gentle legacy of La Vau's poetry soothe you into sleep. The world is wide and full of wonder, and you are exactly where you need to be, floating peacefully on the edge of dreams and breath.